Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Tuesday, August 12th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 18 days, the game against Michigan in 109 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. When that Texas game kicks off in 18 days, who will be Ohio State's starting quarterback? We don't officially know the answer yet, but we might be a little closer to knowing who that answer is. Joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. I know he's not going to be the starting quarterback, but we did get a very important piece of information over the weekend, which is the Buckeyes had their first scrimmage. And then we got a chance to talk to Ryan Day on Monday to get some information out of him in terms of where things maybe stand. So just, I guess, Tony, let's start with just some overall thoughts from Ryan Day, an overall sense on where maybe things are standing right now after that first scrimmage of the fall.
Well, I think the key to keep in mind, one of the key things is they weren't going into this scrimmage looking to have a starter named after the scrimmage. They're still early in that process. It's getting later by the day, however, and then we know the next week's Saturday scrimmage will be very key because after that, as Ryan Day said, it's not quite all Texas after that, but it gets to be pretty close. So right now, this is one of two scrimmages. They got to see what the quarterbacks did in game-like conditions with ones and twos and basically like who you'd be playing with and playing against, or not playing against, but a commensurate defense across the line of scrimmage. So it was a fact-finding mission this weekend, and they'll have another. But right now, they weren't looking to name the starter. And Tom, I'll tell you, like coming into today, into Monday's information, like at some point in every fall camp when there's a quarterback competition, you've got to decide, am I going to pre-write the starting quarterback story? So I did it. I didn't plan on needing it, but didn't want to need it and not have it. So I was asking a few other people on the beat, so did you write yours? And one of them was in the midst of it that morning, and others like, I'm not yet, too early. And because I think we all know, nobody, even if there is a leader, and Ryan Day isn't going to talk about a leader, even if there was a leader, this would be a little early for the announcement.
Yeah, before the start of fall camp, I think we had both sort of circled the same date on the calendar in terms of when we expected them to try to have an announcement. We'll get to that date a little later on. But you talked about this being a fact-finding weekend. And this is a little bit of a fact-finding press conference as well for the media. You know, my sense is that everyone who's pre-writing a starting quarterback piece is probably pre-writing the same person. And one of the reasons that I feel that way is it felt like one of the guys got asked about a whole lot more than the other guy. And that's, what Ryan Day says is you can learn a lot from that. What people, who gets asked about feels like that's also generally pretty instructive in terms of where people are thinking this is sort of trending. And boy, it felt like there were a lot of questions about Julian Sayin, didn't there?
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if there was any single question about Lincoln Kienholz. There are several just about Julian, and several, of course, just about the quarterback battle as a whole. But when asked about Julian, some of the things that Day said, where has he grown the most from, say, the spring to now? His decision-making, command of the huddle, which has been a big talking point, timing, anticipation instead of reacting, and the more reps they take, the more improvement you want to see. And his quote was, I think we're seeing that. And then he also talked about how these guys need to be professionals. And I thought one of the quotes was, that was interesting, a pro remembers because he's done it before, a player is learning. And they want their quarterback to be a pro. And he said Julian Sayin is remembering more now than ever before. So those are all very positive things. And you think back, how often has Ryan Day been critical how often has he been negative about quarterbacks in a quarterback battle? He won't always be effusive in praise, and that's the tea leaves that you have to read. But everything that he said about Julian Sayin today is what you would want your head coach saying about your eventual starting quarterback.
Well, I think we have both sort of felt going through the fall that this wasn't necessarily that there was a ton of question in terms of who the starter was going to be. I think we both have sort of had the expectation that Julian Sayin was ultimately going to be the guy, and that it was maybe more of a question of neither guy was quite where they wanted them to be going into the season, because you don't have the luxury of Akron week 1 or Grambling week 1. You get the Texas Longhorns coming to town, so you got to be ramped up pretty quickly. So the standard for what you need your quarterback to be week 1 is probably a little higher than it has been in the past. Did you get any sense? I mean, it sounds to me, based on what he's saying there, that's stuff that he wasn't necessarily saying 2 weeks ago. That to me suggests you're at least seeing one or both of these guys getting closer to that standard, even if they haven't necessarily crossed that finish line into congratulations, drop the confetti, this guy's the starter.
Yeah, nothing that Ryan Day said today has me thinking there's no way an announcement is made next Monday. I still think that's very possible. And beyond that, there's nothing he said that makes me think this is going to go into week 2 or 3 like he did with Devin Brown and Kyle McCord, even though Kyle McCord started all of those games. It took a while before Day was finally like, okay, Kyle's our starting quarterback. I don't envision that at all. And, if Lincoln would have been asked about in terms of his improvements like Julian was, I wonder if that would finally get Ryan Day to talk about his quarterback ability rather than his athletic ability, which is something that the first thing that everybody talks about is he's athletic and he can do a lot of things. And it's like, well, can he pick up third downs throwing the ball? Can he check out of a bad play? Can he convert in the red zone? Because that's all more important than can he escape trouble or can he hit a curveball? And those are all nice little attributes, but at the end of the day, it's how well do you move the football? And we didn't really get a sense of where Lincoln is in that right now. And this is the biggest week for both of these quarterbacks, I'd say, from now until after Saturday, and then they get a break on Sunday, and then we'll talk with Ryan Day on Monday. Wouldn't be shocked if everybody already knows what Ryan Day is going to tell us on Monday. As Ryan Day said before, the locker room will know.
Yeah, and I mean, I think going into the spring, if we're going to do this like Clue style, where it's Mr. Green with the wrench in the billiard room or whatever, I feel like going into the fall camp, we would have said Julian Sayin on Monday, August 18th with the second scrimmage. Like, you got the second scrimmage coming up on Saturday, and then you're talking to Ryan Day on the following Monday. That has tended to be, unless this is something that's going to really go into game week, and we have seen that happen in the past. 2015 went into, literally the trip down to Blacksburg, and they didn't know who was going to be the starter. And 2023, as you mentioned, there was some, it was the same guy every game, but it was still a little bit of an open competition. This year, it has just felt to me like that this is kind of the traditional time that this would sort of be settled, and that if they had their druthers, this would be the time it would be settled, so that you have a couple weeks to go into the Texas game, without having to, without having this sort of lingering and without having to split up the snaps of the ones. I mean, anything that makes you think that that's not going to ultimately be how this sort of sorts itself out?
No, in fact, Dave recently said last week that he'd like to have the starter named with 2 weeks to go before the first game. That way you can get that guy ready. And with Texas on the horizon, I think everybody wants to know who the starter is and get that guy named and then start building towards that. So even more now than, say, if they were opening up against Hawaii or, whatever, like the earlier you can name that guy, assuming he does well enough to be the starter, the better. And I think we're everybody that's going to go into the press conference on Monday, every outlet is going to have their Julian Sayin story pre-written. And there's only going to be a couple of outlets, maybe one, that will write Lincoln Kienholz just in case, because I don't know that right now, nothing that we're hearing and nothing that we're seeing, nothing that we're, being told is pointing to anything other than Julian Sayin, even though Ryan Day the entire time is saying it's a 2-horse race.
So we will see where those 2 horses are a week from now. Well, that's one of the many stories we'll be following this week. There's a lot to talk about on the offensive line as well. We'll be talking about that probably on Tuesday on the Buckeye Weekly podcast. Going to get a chance to talk to Tyler Bowen and maybe some shuffling on the offensive line. Stuff we've been sort of talking about on the huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus all through fall camp. Sounds like there could be some changes afoot there. We'll be talking about that with you at the on the huddle board presented by Jeff Ruby's Columbus, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. But plenty more to talk about there as well. Haven't even touched on the defensive side of the ball. There's a lot to talk about on there. So we'll be talking about all that with you, with our members at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope you can join us there because have a lot of fun stuff to talk about. Michigan decision might be coming down relatively soon as well. That has been a hot topic there as well. So going to be a busy month at BuckeyeHuddle.com. We hope you can join us there. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.